In the last section, we spoke about some of the challenges that we would run into if we used nested posts as our primary data structure inside of our database. I didn't really suggest any alternative to this, but we're going to continue on this next section and see maybe there's a better way to handle this. Or maybe not necessarily a better way, but a way that's going to make operations like this a little bit easier on ourselves. I want to look at another mock-up for a potential application that we might make. We're going to imagine that maybe our user looks at a list of posts and then they click on a particular one. So like they click on Life with JavaScript. When they click on that, maybe we'd take them to a screen like this, where we show the title of a post, some content in the post. Keep in mind that right now we're not actually recording any blog post content, but we certainly could. And then I've taken the liberty of saying that maybe we'd want to have the ability for users to comment on posts inside our application. So we have not introduced the ability for users to comment inside of our application at all just yet. But I want to, in this section, just think about how we would implement that with this type of nested data structure. The real challenge in this nested, if we started to nest comments somewhere, is figuring out exactly, well, how would we deal with recording who made a particular comment? Right now, it's really easy for us to keep track of who makes a blog post because every blog post is nested inside of a user. And so we just look at the user that the blog post is sitting in and hey, that's who wrote it. But if we want to then nest comments inside of a blog post, but those are supposed to belong to a different user? Wow, okay, this is definitely starting to get a little bit complicated. Let's start thinking about where we might pull each of these pieces of information out of our current schema. So here's one possible approach. Maybe for the author, we could say like user.name. Okay, that would definitely give me Joe. If we're looking at a particular blog post, maybe to get the title, we would be referencing user posts at 0.title, and some content would be like, mystery content property. But then when we get down to the comments down here, yeah, this is definitely more challenging. How exactly would we nest our comments in here? And the answer is that, well, this is really pushing the bounds of nesting data structures one in the other. Since we have all these, nested data structures with a lot of kind of built-in or implicit references, it would start to be really challenging to maintain all this stuff, and most importantly, write queries to efficiently find a lot of this data. For example, if we nested comments inside of posts, which were in turn nested inside of users, how would I ever write a query where I could get all of the comments that Amanda has ever made? Like that starts to get just arbitrarily difficult, really, really hard. So I'm going to suggest maybe there's a better way to do this. So maybe instead of having a single collection of users where every user can have a nested collection of posts, of subdocuments, maybe we could instead, well, just to be 100%, sorry, got a little bit out of order here, but just to be 100% clear, this is kind of the, if we added in the idea of comments, maybe this is one way we could handle it. So maybe we could say that a user has posts, and a post has comments, and a comment had a content, something like that. But what I'm trying to get at, here we go. Here's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to suggest maybe a good way of solving this overall problem would be to break out 3 different types of collections inside of our application. Maybe we could have a collection of users, a collection of posts, and a collection of comments. A user, rather than having a nested subdocument collection of posts, could have an array of post IDs. So just the IDs of the posts they have been created. So then at any point in time, if we had a user and we wanted to find all the posts that belong to them, we could ask our post collection to give us the IDs that are contained within the post IDs property of a particular user. In addition, if we had a comment collection, we could then record all of the comments that belong to a particular post on a property comment IDs and record that on a post. So then if we wanted to know, okay, what are all the posts or what are all the comments that belong to this particular post, we could look at the comment IDs property and then pull off a list of all the different comments we have. And then finally, to figure out what comment was made by which users, each comment could record a user ID property, which points back at a user collection. This would definitely solve a tremendous number of our issues. It it would make pulling an arbitrary number of posts, like say, like just give me 10 arbitrary posts, the latest 10 posts or something like that, would start to get really straightforward. Finding a list of all the comments that a particular user has made would also get really straightforward. The downside to this approach, however, is that now that we have 3 separate collections, our queries are going to get a little bit more painful because we're going to have to first find, if I want to find all of the posts that a user has made, I would have to touch the database one time to pull out a particular user, like user Joe. I would then look at all the different post IDs they have, and then I would dive back into the database again to fetch all the posts out of there as well. So definitely things start to get, pros and cons. It's really a balancing act. One thing I want to mention in particular about a new NoSQL approach with this right here compared to a traditional relational database. If you have any previous experience with a relational database, you might look at this and say, aha, a collection, or excuse me, a table of users, a table of posts, and a table of comments. Well, yeah, it definitely is similar to that type of architecture, to that type of structure. But using MongoDB exclusively in this type of fashion, or trying to emulate a relational database, starts to get you in hot water really quick for that last reason that I just described. We don't have single operation joins inside of Mongo. So unlike a real-time database where we could very easily in a single query say, give me a user and then look at the post collection and give me all the related posts to that user, you can achieve that with a single query inside of a MySQL or Postgres database, but we can't really do the same thing with NoSQL or MongoDB. Definitely gets a little bit more challenging. Okay, so lots of talking, lots of lecturing. What I'm trying to communicate here, or the end takeaway of all this, is that nesting records definitely has its places, and there are definitely some legitimate use cases for taking that kind of approach. However, there are also some problems or some challenges that are just really hard to approach or solve when we take that nested document approach. Most explicitly, stuff like this. Just, hey, give me a list of all my posts. Yeah, that's kind of hard. That's not the easiest thing in the world. On the flip side, if we flip out to always using separate collections, then we start to have to worry a little bit about performance concerns, because to do these equally trivial or simple operations, we have to start touching our database multiple times just to fetch out, some relatively simple amount of data. So let's continue the next section, and we're going to start thinking about how we might do a little bit of a refactor to our test suite right now to satisfy this type of multi-collections setup.